So mining pools are interesting because I think when you go see a mining pool that says getting up to 50% of the hashing power and so on, what people forget is that's a short-term danger. It's not a long-term danger. If in the short term that mining pool uses that percentage to endanger the Bitcoin network, currently I believe we would see the vast majority of people with hashing power, or hashers as it's often called, leave that mining pool and go to another one. Now, unfortunately, in those few hours, few days where this happens, you can have a lot of harm happen. You can get people getting double spend, you can get people getting ripped off, but it's something that you can fix. And that's because currently the Bitcoin technology is still fairly decentralized. It's not perfect, but it's still pretty good. What worries me is changing that technology so that option's no longer there. As an example, if we say raise the block size to make transactions cheaper, well, you'd make transactions cheaper, but at some point, if a mining pool misbehaves, it's much more expensive, potentially impossible, to start up a new one. And say, look, BTC Guild ripped off, 100 merchants and made them lose $1 million. Well, that's all well and good if you can go make a new pool the next day. It's not well and good if you can't. And at some point with a raised block size, you won't be able to do that. And it's hard to know exactly what that point is. And that point also depends on political issues, like can you get anonymous bandwidth? Can you get enough bandwidth to serve blocks? This is why at a technical level, I'm always working to keeping that decentralization, making sure Bitcoin can scale up without sacrificing it. Other people don't have that concern.
Do you think that the formation of mining guilds is actually the beginning of centralization really for Bitcoin?
I think it's the first symptom, but that's a symptom of a common cold. It's not a big deal yet. Yet. If we change the system, it'll be a big problem. But right now, it's something to worry about, but it's not something to panic about.
What? So,
a zero confirmation double spend means I sent a transaction to the Bitcoin network, and I sent another one that double spent it. Now remember, both transactions are unconfirmed. They're not in a block. There's no cryptographic proof that they were ever broadcast at all. It's just a very, very loose... there is no proof. That's kind of the way to put it. And if you heard about transaction number 1 first, I may have heard about transaction number 2 first. Or I even should say A and B. There is no order. And this, if on one level it comes down to physics, relativity does not have this notion of consistent order. On the other hand, it comes down to simple properties of distributed networks. They're across the globe. There is no way to come to consensus until you run through the proof of work algorithm and get things in blocks. Unfortunately, people have not realized this, and they made very broken assumptions that whatever transaction they saw first would always be the one that got mined, which you just can't guarantee that. And unfortunately, one of the ways to fix this problem is to further centralize Bitcoin. Mike Hearn went and had a proposal called either Coinbase reallocation or Coinbase blacklisting, which either way, it essentially says miners will vote with their hashing power to go and blacklist a block that was found by another miner and either destroy the reward that they got from the block or reallocate that reward to someone else. And I think the notion of the wolves and the lamb voting on what to eat for dinner kind of comes to mind there. Yet, on the other hand, for people who don't value decentralization and don't really care, it certainly is this kind of a seductive concept. Adds order, adds authority, adds, punishment and discipline to the Bitcoin system. Well, I would argue that's changing what Bitcoin is. It's not about authority. So what I proposed was a patch I call replace my fee, which is to say your node, when you receive a transaction and it double spends a previous one, you should just mine whichever one would pay you the most money in terms of fees. And that's a simple rule. It's, economically rational in the short term. And the beauty of it is it forces us to go create better solutions that don't rely on authority. that, stick with the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. And there's tons of them. So why not do that? Why not, why take the easy way out? Why centralize Bitcoin? And that's kind of been the thrust of all my work. So zero confirmations is obviously unsafe in many cases. But in some cases it's safe enough too. If I go trust you and you've sent me a transaction, well, if I can trust you, I don't need a confirmation. I trust you not to double spend. Or if I know who you are, and if you double spend, I can go off to the police or something. That's fine too. And it's decentralized in that the guarantee is between you and me. I mean, sure, one potential way to do this is I go off to the police, I go off to some authority, but it's my authority. It's one that, I and you agree to use. And that's okay. I have nothing wrong with that. Now, if you do not have that kind of guarantee, well, then you start adding confirmations. And then it's kind of this complex thing about, well, how much money are you moving? What kind of risks can you take on? I mean, any number of transactions can get reversed. It just becomes less probable. It's rare to see one confirmation get reversed, even more rare to see two, and it gets more and more rare after that. But we've seen we've seen 50 confirmations get reversed once every few years due to bugs. So yeah, long and short of it is, if I was accepting $10,000, I'd probably wait for 6 or 7 or something. So I was accepting $1 million, I might wait a day, just to be sure. If I was accepting $10 billion, well, I wouldn't want to rely on just Bitcoin. At that point, at some point it becomes so valuable, you need something else. At some point it's so valuable, you got to wait a while. But, it's just a matter of risk. I mean, I don't even think we really know what the risk is. It's a black swan event when 100 confirmations get reversed. It'll probably happen at some point. And it's not going to follow some exponential risk distribution like we think it should. It'll be due to some bug in the system or something. But, for your transaction, it's not likely to happen. I would say that when you look at early adopters and early technology, the fundamental thing is to remember that they're both early. I mean, I like to go say about Bitcoin in relation to all these sort of finance 2.0 projects, that chances are this is like the internet boom. 95% of these projects are going to fail. 5% might succeed. There'll be more after the first round. The reality is this is experimental stuff. I can't go tell you what is or isn't going to win. I don't know myself. But I think what we can judge is that it's unique. It does offer capabilities that just do not exist otherwise. It doesn't necessarily offer all the capabilities people want it to. I mean, in many cases, it doesn't offer cheaper transactions. Bitcoin isn't magic. Often centralized systems really are more efficient. But in cases where there's disagreement or where there's issues of authority that may be misbehaving, Bitcoin offers a good solution, I hope. Well, I think what's fascinating about the Bitcoin technology from a social perspective is that Bitcoin relies on sort of two things. One is freedom of speech, and the other one is this notion of truth. And freedom of speech is the first part in that my transactions are speech. Bitcoin assumes that I'm free to go publish those transactions. I'm free to tell other people about that information. Bitcoin assumes that data is easy to spread and hard to censor. That's a fundamental assumption in how Bitcoin works. And it also makes it harder to censor it. And then the second half is that building upon this, the Bitcoin system provides this notion of truth, in that I can go prove to you one of two things, that I did or did not publish a piece of data. Now it goes way beyond that to kind of bootstrap this whole financial system, but at the core, there's this very, very simple concept of proof of publication, which is just I can go prove you that. And then from that, well, I can do things like I can go prove to you that my records, my statements that I've made, maybe I'm a corporation and I have financial statements. I can go prove to you that those financial statements that I'm giving you are the same ones that everyone else gets. I'm not trying to trick you. And that's core of what Bitcoin is. You know, it's truth really. It's truth about what happened. Now, truth kind of has many meanings, but I think that's a very good way to talk about it. And to go censor, say, Bitcoin transactions is really trying to go censor the truth about whether or not I wanted to go pay you, or whether or not I published some statement to my financial records, whether or not, you know, I released some software and I encoded my release into the Bitcoin blockchain. These are all things I can do with Bitcoin, and it's all about truth.